Meet Jackson Washington, respected constitutional lawyer, devoted husband and father. One morning at a simple red light, his life changes forever. Tyler Bradford, son of powerful Senator William Bradford, cuts him off in traffic, spits in his face, grabs his collar, all caught on camera. What Tyler doesn't know, Jackson Washington is about to be nominated to the Supreme Court. As video of the assault goes viral, Senator Bradford desperately tries to bury the scandal. But for once, his influence isn't enough. The senator faces a choice: protect his son or salvage his career. Meanwhile, Jackson Washington's dignified response captivates the nation. His confirmation hearings become a national sensation. Then comes the twist no one saw coming. Tyler Bradford steps forward, confessing everything, including his father's history of corruption and cover-ups. Justice finally arrives, not just for Jackson Washington, but for all of Tyler's previous victims. Was justice served in the end? Should Tyler Bradford have received a harsher sentence? Comment below with your thoughts, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful stories about justice prevailing against privilege and corruption. Jackson Washington adjusted his rearview mirror as he waited for the light to turn green. At 38, he'd built a solid reputation as one of the nation's top constitutional lawyers, though most people wouldn't know it from his modest demeanor. Today was no different, dressed in a simple button-down and slacks, driving his reliable sedan to meet with the president's legal team. After years of dedication, Jackson had been quietly shortlisted for the Supreme Court vacancy, though the news wouldn't go public for another week. The morning sun cast long shadows across the intersection of 5th and Madison. Jackson tapped his fingers on the steering wheel, mentally rehearsing his upcoming presentation. His son's basketball championship photo smiled back at him from the dashboard, a reminder of what mattered most. The light turned red for the cross traffic. Jackson waited patiently, following the rules as he always did. That's when he heard the engine revving behind him. A sleek white sports car swerved around, cutting in front of Jackson's sedan and stopping at an angle that blocked him. The driver, a young white man in his 20s wearing designer sunglasses and a smug expression, stepped out and approached Jackson's window. "Hey, you cut me off back there," the young man shouted, his words slightly slurred. Jackson remained calm, rolling down his window just enough to respond. "Sir, I've been in this lane for the past mile. I didn't cut anyone off." "Are you calling me a liar?" The young man's face flushed red with anger. "I know what I saw. You people always drive like you on the road." Jackson noticed other drivers watching the scene unfold. An older woman in the car next to him was already recording with her phone. Jackson took a deep breath, determined to defuse the situation. "Sir, the light's about to change. We should both get back in our vehicles." "Don't tell me what to do." The young man slammed his hand against Jackson's car door. "My father is Senator Bradford. Do you know what that means? I can make your life very difficult." So this was Tyler Bradford, Senator William Bradford's notorious son. Jackson had heard stories about the younger Bradford's entitlement and run-ins with the law, always mysteriously resolved without consequences. "I understand you're upset," Jackson said evenly, "but this isn't the way to resolve whatever issue you think occurred." Tyler's response was immediate and shocking. He spat directly at Jackson, the saliva landing on his cheek and suit collar. "Next time, watch where you're driving." Jackson sat perfectly still, dignity intact despite the humiliation. He calmly reached for the tissues in his console, wiping away the spit while maintaining eye contact with Tyler. "Sir, I'm going to ask you once more to return to your vehicle. You're creating a dangerous situation." Instead, Tyler reached through the partially open window, grabbing Jackson's collar. "Maybe you need to learn some respect." That's when a police cruiser pulled up, lights flashing. Officer Martinez stepped out, immediately assessing the situation. "What's going on here?" she asked, hand resting casually near her holster. "This guy cut me off," Tyler said smugly, releasing Jackson's shirt. "I was just explaining road etiquette to him." Officer Martinez looked from Tyler to Jackson. "Sir, are you okay?" she asked Jackson. "This young man stopped his vehicle in traffic and physically assaulted me," Jackson replied calmly. "There should be several witnesses, including that woman recording over there." "Do you know who my father is?" Tyler interrupted, puffing his chest. "Senator Bradford. One call from him and your badge is worthless." The officer's expression hardened. "Step back from the vehicle, sir." "You're making a huge mistake," Tyler snarled, but he backed up. Officer Martinez approached Jackson. "Would you like to press charges, sir?" "Yes," Jackson answered firmly. "And I'd like to get the footage from that witness, please." As Tyler was led to the police cruiser, he shouted over his shoulder, "My father will destroy you. You have no idea who you're messing with." Jackson watched calmly, memorizing every detail of the encounter. In his 20 years of legal practice, he'd learned that documentation was everything. As the officer took his statement, Jackson noticed 3 separate witnesses approaching, phones in hand, eager to share what they'd captured. "I got everything," the older woman said, showing Jackson her phone screen. "That boy's behavior was disgusting. Are you all right, honey?" I am, thank you, Jackson replied, his composure unshaken despite the assault. And thank you for recording. That footage may be very important. As he sat in his car waiting to complete the police report, Jackson's phone rang. It was the White House calling. The president needed to speak with him immediately about finalizing his Supreme Court nomination. Tyler Bradford had no idea whom he'd just assaulted, but he would soon find out. Senator William Bradford slammed his office door so hard the framed congressional seal rattled against the wall. His chief of staff, Helen Whitmore, flinched but held her ground. After 15 years working for the senator, she was accustomed to his volatile temper. What do you mean Tyler was arrested? Again, Bradford's voice boomed across the mahogany-furnished office. At 58, the senator's imposing figure and silver hair had graced countless campaign materials across his conservative southern state. It happened about an hour ago, sir, Helen replied, checking her tablet. He was involved in a traffic altercation downtown. According to the police report, he blocked another driver, verbally assaulted him with racial slurs, and then physically assaulted him by spitting on him and grabbing his clothing. Bradford sank into his leather chair. Who's the other driver? A black man named Jackson Washington. Early records show he's an attorney, but we're still gathering details. The senator waved dismissively. Just some ambulance chaser looking for a payday. Call Judge Mercer. We'll have this handled by lunch. There's more, sir. 3 witnesses recorded the incident. One video is already circulating on social media. Bradford's face darkened. Take care of it, Helen. That's what I pay you for. Use the usual channels, offer settlement money, sign NDAs, whatever it takes. He checked his watch. I have a committee meeting in 30 minutes and dinner with donors tonight. This needs to disappear before the evening news cycle. I'll do what I can, sir, Helen said, making notes. But this might be trickier than previous incidents. The officer involved, Maria Martinez, has a reputation for being by the book. Everyone has a price, Helen. Find hers. As Helen left to make calls, Bradford's personal cell phone rang. It was Tyler calling from the police station. Dad, you have to get me out of here, Tyler whined, his usual arrogance replaced with desperation. They're talking felony assault charges because of some hate crime nonsense. It's completely ridiculous. Keep your voice down, Bradford hissed. I'm handling it. Did you say anything incriminating? Of course not. I just told them who you were and that this would all be cleared up soon. Bradford pinched the bridge of his nose. His son never learned. Sit tight, don't say another word to anyone, I'll have you out within the hour. Across town, Jackson Washington sat in Police Captain Diane Rogers' office reviewing his statement. His collar still bore the stain from Tyler's spit, preserved as evidence. Mr. Washington, we have 3 witness videos confirming your account, Captain Rogers said. Mr. Bradford is facing charges of assault, disorderly conduct, and potentially hate crime enhancements based on the racial slurs witnesses heard. Jackson nodded. I appreciate the thoroughness, Captain. Too often, incidents like this are dismissed. Not on my watch, Rogers replied firmly. Though I should warn you, Senator Bradford has influence. There will be pressure to drop this. I'm familiar with the senator's reputation, Jackson said calmly, but I believe in our justice system even when it's imperfect. Captain Rogers studied him. You seem very composed for someone who was just assaulted. Jackson smiled slightly. In my line of work, composure is essential. And what work is that exactly? Our system just shows you as an attorney. Before Jackson could respond, his phone buzzed with a text message from the White House Chief of Staff. President confirmed final decision. Announcement moved up to tomorrow morning. Car arriving to bring you to White House in 30 min. I'm a constitutional lawyer, Jackson answered simply, currently consulting on some important cases. As Jackson left the police station, he called his wife Aisha, a pediatric surgeon at Memorial Hospital. Jay, I saw the video, Aisha said immediately. Are you okay? I'm fine, he assured her, just a difficult morning. That was Senator Bradford's son, wasn't it? This could get complicated with your nomination. It already is. The president's moving the announcement to tomorrow, Aisha sighed. Bradford sits on the Judiciary Committee. He'll be part of your confirmation hearings. Yes, Jackson agreed. Interesting timing. Meanwhile, Senator Bradford's influence was already at work. Judge Mercer had made calls but was surprised to hit unusual resistance. The police captain refused to expedite Tyler's release without following standard booking procedures. The witnesses weren't answering calls from Bradford's team trying to arrange interviews. By late afternoon, Helen entered Bradford's office looking worried. Sir, we've identified Jackson Washington. He's not just any attorney. Bradford looked up impatiently. What do you mean? He's a constitutional scholar. Harvard Law Review argued 7 cases before the Supreme Court, winning 6. Former clerk for Justice Williams. Bradford shrugged. So he's connected. Offer him more money. There's more, Helen continued, her voice tight. There are rumors circulating in Washington that the president is announcing his Supreme Court nominee tomorrow. Sources suggest it's someone unexpected. And what does that have to do with my idiot son's traffic incident? Helen placed a folder on Bradford's desk. Inside was a photograph of Jackson, Washington shaking hands with the president at a private reception last month. Our sources at the White House wouldn't confirm, but 3 separate contacts indicated the same thing. Jackson, Washington is the president's choice for the Supreme Court vacancy. For the first time in years, Senator William Bradford was speechless. As chairman of the Judiciary Committee, he would preside over the confirmation hearings of the man his son had just assaulted. The phone on his desk rang. It was the president's office calling. Senator Bradford stared at the ringing phone as if it were a venomous snake. The White House calling now could only mean one thing. They knew about Tyler's incident with Washington. Bradford composed himself and picked up the receiver. Senator Bradford speaking. William, it's President Chambers. The president's familiar baritone carried its usual authoritative warmth. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Not at all, Mr. President. What can I do for you? Bradford forced a casual tone while signaling Helen to close his office door. I wanted to give you a courtesy heads up. I'm announcing my Supreme Court nominee tomorrow morning. As Judiciary Committee Chair, you'll be front and center for the confirmation process. Bradford's knuckles whitened around the phone. I appreciate the notice. Any hints about who you've selected? The president chuckled. You know I can't spoil the surprise, William. But I will say this, I've chosen someone with impeccable credentials who I believe can bridge some of our nation's deepening divides, someone even you might find difficult to oppose. Sounds intriguing, Bradford replied, fighting to keep his voice steady. I look forward to the announcement. After exchanging pleasantries, Bradford hung up and immediately buzzed his assistant. Get me Tyler's attorney on the phone, now. 20 minutes later, Bradford was pacing his office while speaking to Martin Scheffler, the high-priced lawyer who had extracted Tyler from numerous previous legal entanglements. I don't care what it costs, Bradford hissed. Get those videos suppressed and get this Washington character to drop the charges. Senator, I've already made inquiries, Scheffler replied cautiously. This situation is unusual. The videos have already been logged as evidence. Captain Rogers has a reputation for being incorruptible, and Washington isn't responding to any settlement overtures. Then find something on Washington. Everyone has skeletons. Sir, with respect, preliminary background checks show Washington is remarkably clean. Married 15 years to a pediatric surgeon, one son, pays his taxes, no criminal record, not even a parking ticket in the last decade. Bradford collapsed into his chair. Martin, listen to me carefully. I have reason to believe Washington is about to be nominated to the Supreme Court. By this time tomorrow, I'll be the man responsible for shepherding his confirmation hearings. If these assault charges and videos go public. The line went silent as Scheffler processed the implications. I understand, Senator, I'll pursue every angle, but you should prepare for the possibility that this story breaks. After hanging up, Bradford summoned Helen back to his office. We need a contingency plan. If Washington is the nominee and this story breaks, I'm finished. There might be a way to get ahead of this, Helen suggested cautiously. What if you publicly recuse yourself from chairing the confirmation hearings, citing a personal conflict? Say Tyler had a minor traffic incident with Washington, nothing serious, but you're stepping aside to avoid any appearance of impropriety. Bradford considered this. It would mean giving up a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to shape the court. Senator Reynolds would take over as chair. Better than being exposed as trying to obstruct justice to protect your son from assault charges against a Supreme Court nominee, Helen pointed out bluntly. Meanwhile, across town, Jackson, Washington sat in a secure conference room at the White House. Chief of Staff Elaine Morgan reviewed final preparations for tomorrow's announcement. The press conference is scheduled for 9 a.m., Elaine explained. President will introduce you, you'll make brief remarks, and then we'll move to the one-on-one interviews we've arranged with major networks. Jackson nodded, reviewing his prepared statement. Has there been any unusual activity from the Judiciary Committee members, particularly Senator Bradford? Elaine raised an eyebrow. You mean besides his son assaulting you this morning? The senator's office has been making calls all afternoon, judges, police officials, witnesses from the incident. They're scrambling. I assumed they would, Jackson said calmly. The timing is unfortunate. Unfortunate? Elaine looked incredulous. Jackson, Bradford chairs the committee that will decide your confirmation. His son committed a hate crime against you on video hours before your nomination announcement. This isn't just unfortunate, it's a political powder keg. Jackson set down his papers. Elaine, I've spent my career believing in the system, even while working to improve it. I won't let this incident, or Bradford's response to it, change that. The senator has a choice to make now. How he makes it will reveal his character. The president wants to know if you'd prefer to delay the announcement, give this situation time to resolve. Jackson shook his head firmly. No delays. Justice doesn't wait for political convenience. As they continued their preparations, Jackson received a text from Aisha. Tyler Bradford released on bail. News vans outside our house. Should I take Jamal to my sister's? Jackson replied immediately. Yes, I'll call in security detail. Love you both. Across the city, Tyler Bradford stumbled out of the police station into the backseat of a waiting town car, his father's aide closing the door behind him. This is ridiculous, Tyler slurred, still reeking of last night's alcohol. All this over some nobody who couldn't drive properly. The aide remained silent, having been strictly instructed not to engage. My father will fix this, Tyler continued, oblivious to the gravity of his situation. He always does. What Tyler didn't know was that Senator Bradford was at that moment receiving devastating news from his investigator. Not only was Jackson Washington almost certainly the Supreme Court nominee, but the video of Tyler's assault had just been leaked to 3 major news networks. The Bradford political dynasty, built over 3 generations, now faced its greatest crisis, and the countdown to tomorrow's announcement had already begun. By 6 a.m., the story had exploded. Every major news network displayed the same jarring footage. Tyler Bradford leaning into Jackson Washington's car window, spitting on him, grabbing his collar, and shouting what lip readers had confirmed were racial slurs. The contrasting composure of Washington made Tyler's actions look even more egregious. Senator Bradford hadn't slept. Dark circles shadowed his eyes as he watched the morning news coverage from his home office, remote in hand, flipping between channels in growing horror. Son of Senator William Bradford, chairman of the Judiciary Committee, caught on camera in what appears to be a racially motivated assault. Sources close to the White House refused to confirm rumors that Jackson Washington, the victim in this morning's viral assault video, may be connected to today's Supreme Court announcement. This marks the 6th incident involving Tyler Bradford in the past 3 years, though previous cases were settled out of court. The senator's phone hadn't stopped ringing since 5 a.m., colleagues, donors, party leadership all demanding explanations. He'd ignored most calls but couldn't avoid the one that came through now. Bradford, he answered tersely. William, it's Majority Leader Phillips. Tell me you have a plan to address this disaster. Bradford pinched the bridge of his nose. Charles, it's a personal family matter that's being blown out of proportion. Cut the crap, William, Phillips interrupted. I've seen the videos, multiple videos. Your son committed a hate crime on camera and word is the victim is the president's Supreme Court pick. This isn't just a family matter, it's a catastrophe for the party. I'm handling it. No, you're not, that's why I'm calling. The caucus is meeting in an hour. We're voting on whether to temporarily remove you as Judiciary Chair. Bradford shot to his feet. You can't do that. I've held that position for 8 years. We can and we will if necessary, Phillips replied coldly. Unless you voluntarily step aside for this nomination process, your choice, William, step down gracefully or be voted out. As the call ended, Helen entered with a stack of newspapers, all featuring the incident on their front pages. Sir, we need to get ahead of this. The White House announcement is in 3 hours. Bradford slumped in his chair. They're forcing me to recuse myself from the hearings. That might be for the best, Helen suggested cautiously. It creates distance between you and Washington. Distance? Bradford laughed bitterly. My son is on video committing a hate crime against a Supreme Court nominee. There's no distance that helps with that. Helen placed a folder on his desk. Our team compiled everything we could find on Washington overnight. He's impressive, sir, first in his class at Harvard Law, turned down 7-figure offers to work on civil rights cases. Impeccable judicial record, widely respected across the political spectrum. Bradford flipped through the file, his expression darkening. So not only did Tyler assault someone on camera, he picked one of the most qualified judicial candidates in a generation. He closed the folder with disgust. Where is my son now? At your lake house with private security, as you instructed. He's been advised to remain out of public view and off social media. Too little, too late, Bradford muttered. Across town, Jackson Washington adjusted his tie in the mirror of the White House preparation room. Despite the morning's chaos, he remained focused on the historic nature of the day ahead. If confirmed, he would be only the 3rd black man to serve on the Supreme Court. A gentle knock preceded the entrance of President Chambers. At 64, the president carried himself with the easy confidence of someone comfortable with power. Jackson, how are you holding up? The president asked, concern evident in his voice. I'm ready, Mr. President, Jackson replied with quiet determination. The Bradford situation has complicated things, the president acknowledged. I've been fielding calls all morning, party leaders, activists, media. Everyone wants to know if we're postponing the announcement. And what have you told them? That justice doesn't operate on a political timetable. The president smiled. Your exact words, I believe. Jackson nodded appreciatively. Senator Bradford's actions and his sons shouldn't dictate this process. Bradford is stepping aside as Judiciary Chair for your confirmation hearings. Senator Reynolds will take over. A wise decision, Jackson replied, keeping his expression neutral despite this significant development. There's something else you should know, the president continued. Bradford has requested a private meeting with you before the announcement. No staff, no press. Jackson raised an eyebrow. Did he say why? No, but it's not hard to guess. The question is, are you willing to meet with him? Jackson considered this carefully. Yes, it might be illuminating to hear what he has to say. 30 minutes later, Jackson sat alone in a small White House conference room when Senator Bradford was escorted in. The senator looked haggard, his normally impeccable appearance showing signs of strain. An awkward silence hung between them until Bradford spoke. Mr. Washington, thank you for agreeing to this meeting. Of course, Senator, Jackson replied evenly. Bradford cleared his throat. I want to apologize personally for my son's inexcusable behavior yesterday. There's no justification for his actions. I appreciate that, Senator, though I wonder if you're apologizing to me or to the Supreme Court nominee you just discovered I am. Bradford flinched at the directness. I deserve that. The timing of my apology is suspicious. Indeed. Mr. Washington, I've been in politics for 30 years. I know how to navigate scandals and manage crises, but this situation, Bradford gestured helplessly. My son assaulted the man I'm supposed to evaluate for the highest court in the land. No amount of political maneuvering fixes that. Jackson studied the senator carefully. What are you looking for from me, Senator Bradford? Bradford met his gaze directly for the first time. Honestly, I don't know. Perhaps understanding that while I've failed miserably as a father, I've tried to serve this country honorably as a senator. Your record speaks for itself, Senator. As does your son's behavior and your history of helping him escape consequences for similar incidents. Bradford's face flushed. You've done your homework. As have you, I'm sure, Jackson replied calmly. In 30 minutes, the president will nominate me to the Supreme Court. Your son faces criminal charges for assaulting me. These facts won't change regardless of this conversation. Bradford stood defeated. I understand. I'll be stepping aside from the Judiciary Committee for your confirmation process. A prudent decision. As Bradford reached the door, he paused. One more thing, Mr. Washington. Do you believe my son deserves jail time for what he did to you? Jackson rose from his chair. What I believe, Senator, is that everyone deserves equal justice under the law, no more, no less. Justice isn't about what I want for your son, it's about what the law requires. That principle is why I've accepted this nomination. As Bradford left, Jackson straightened his tie once more. In 10 minutes, he would stand beside the president as his nomination was announced to the world. The path ahead would be challenging, but this moment, this test of his principles, had only strengthened his resolve. At precisely 9 a.m., President Chambers stepped up to the podium in the White House Rose Garden. A sea of reporters and cameras stretched before him, the atmosphere electric with anticipation. Behind him stood Jackson Washington, the picture of dignified composure despite the extraordinary circumstances surrounding this moment. Good morning, the president began. Today, I have the honor of announcing my nominee to fill the vacancy on the United States Supreme Court. Camera shutters clicked rapidly as the president continued. The individual I have selected embodies the highest ideals of our justice system: integrity, wisdom, fairness, and an unwavering commitment to constitutional principles that transcend political divisions. Jackson stood perfectly still, his expression serene despite the weight of history upon his shoulders. In the crowd, he spotted several familiar faces, colleagues from his civil rights work, former law clerks and judges he'd appeared before. His wife Aisha and son Jamal watched from the front row, pride evident in their expressions. It is therefore with great pride that I nominate Jackson Washington to serve as Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, the president announced, turning to gesture toward Jackson as applause erupted from portions of the audience. As Jackson stepped forward to the podium, a reporter called out, Mr. Washington, will you address the incident with Senator Bradford's son? The president frowned at the interruption, but Jackson raised a hand slightly, indicating he would handle the question. He adjusted the microphone and surveyed the crowd with calm authority. Thank you, Mr. President, for your confidence in me. I am deeply honored by this nomination. Jackson paused, his voice steady and measured. Regarding yesterday's incident, I believe the judicial system will address that matter appropriately. Today is about the Supreme Court and the Constitution we all serve. I intend to keep these matters separate, as justice requires. The response silenced the room momentarily before Jackson continued with his prepared remarks, outlining his judicial philosophy and commitment to equal justice under law. His words were powerful yet humble, striking a tone that made even veteran White House correspondents take notice. Across town, Senator Bradford watched the announcement from his office, surrounded by his closest advisors. Tyler remained secluded at the lake house under strict instructions to speak to no one. He's good, Helen observed as Washington fielded questions with remarkable poise. Very good, Bradford nodded grimly. and now impossible to oppose without looking like we're retaliating for the assault. Reynolds has already told me the committee will fast-track his nomination. What's our play? Asked James Morton, Bradford's longtime political strategist. We don't have one, Bradford admitted. Every attack on Washington will be seen as vengeance for my son's actions. Every defense of Tyler will be seen as excusing racism. We're boxed in completely. There might be a way through this, Helen suggested cautiously. But it would require something you've never done before. Bradford raised an eyebrow. Which is complete transparency. No spin, no political maneuvering. Public acknowledgement of Tyler's history, your role in shielding him from consequences, and a commitment to ensuring he faces appropriate justice this time. The room fell silent as Bradford considered this unprecedented approach. And sacrifice my son's future, my family's reputation. With respect, Senator, Helen replied firmly, your son sacrificed his own future yesterday, and your family's reputation is already in tatters. This approach isn't about saving either, it's about salvaging your legacy and possibly your Senate seat. Bradford's phone buzzed with a text from Majority Leader Phillips. Caucus vote complete. You're temporarily removed as Judiciary Chair unless you voluntarily step aside by noon. Your call. Meanwhile, at the White House, Jackson concluded his remarks to resounding applause. As he stepped away from the podium, the president shook his hand warmly before they moved inside for the scheduled interviews. In the diplomatic reception room set up for the first interview with CNN, Jackson checked his phone before the cameras went live. A text message from Aisha read, "So proud of you. Stay focused. Tyler Bradford's lawyer just announced a press conference for 2 p.m. Jackson slipped the phone into his pocket as the CNN interviewer approached, her producer signaling they would go live in 30 seconds. Mr. Washington, she began once the cameras were rolling, congratulations on your nomination. I have to start with the extraordinary circumstances surrounding today's announcement. Less than 24 hours ago, you were physically assaulted by the son of the very senator who would have led your confirmation hearings. How does that impact your approach to this process? Jackson smiled slightly. Throughout my career, I've encountered barriers that weren't of my making. Each time, I've chosen to focus not on the obstacle but on the principles that guide me past it. This situation is no different. Senator Bradford has been temporarily removed as Judiciary Chair. Do you believe he should face additional consequences? That's for the Senate to decide, Jackson replied diplomatically. My focus remains on the confirmation process and the important work ahead. The video of your assault has been viewed over 10 million times since this morning. Many people are remarking on your composure in the face of such aggression. How did you remain so calm? Jackson paused, considering his answer carefully. When you've spent your career fighting for equality under the law, you understand that justice isn't achieved through emotional reactions, but through steadfast adherence to principle. In that moment, my commitment to those principles mattered more than my personal feelings. The interview continued for another 15 minutes, touching on Jackson's judicial philosophy, landmark cases he'd argued, and his vision for the court. Throughout, he demonstrated the same remarkable balance of intellect, compassion, and wisdom that had earned him the president's nomination. As the interview concluded, the producer whispered something to the CNN anchor, whose eyes widened in surprise. Mr. Washington, we've just received breaking news that may impact your confirmation process. Tyler Bradford has released a statement admitting guilt and apologizing for his actions yesterday. He has also revealed a history of similar incidents that were, in his words, covered up by my father's influence. Do you have any response to this development? Jackson maintained his composure, though even he couldn't hide his surprise entirely. I believe in second chances and the possibility of redemption. If Mr. Bradford is taking responsibility for his actions, that's a positive step. Beyond that, I'll let the legal process take its course. As the cameras turned off, Jackson checked his phone again. The news alerts were flooding in. Tyler Bradford had broken ranks with his father's damage control efforts and decided to come clean about everything. Tyler Bradford adjusted his tie nervously as cameras flashed around him. The press conference, hastily arranged by his new attorney, one he'd hired without his father's knowledge, was about to begin. Gone was the arrogant young man who had spat on Jackson Washington just yesterday. In his place sat someone visibly shaken, with dark circles under bloodshot eyes. Thank you all for coming, began Natalie Chen, Tyler's attorney. My client has prepared a statement and will then answer a limited number of questions. Tyler approached the microphone, hands trembling slightly as he unfolded a handwritten statement. The room fell silent. My name is Tyler Bradford. Yesterday morning, I physically and verbally assaulted a man named Jackson Washington in a traffic incident. His voice cracked slightly as he continued. There is no excuse for my behavior. It was racist, it was violent, and it was wrong. The room remained unusually quiet as reporters recognized the gravity of the moment. What many people don't know is that this wasn't an isolated incident. Throughout my life, I've engaged in similar behavior, driving under the influence, verbal and physical assaults, property damage, and each time my father, Senator William Bradford, used his influence to make the consequences disappear. Across town, Senator Bradford watched in horror as his son publicly dismantled the family's carefully constructed facade. Helen and other staffers stood frozen around him, equally stunned by this unexpected development. "Call him now," Bradford demanded, but Helen shook her head. "His phone is off, sir, and his security detail says they're under instructions from Tyler not to interfere." At the press conference, Tyler continued, "I've spent my entire life believing I was untouchable. Yesterday, when I assaulted Mr. Washington, I expected the same protection I've always received. When I learned who he was, a Supreme Court nominee, I realized for the first time that my actions might have consequences I couldn't escape." He took a deep breath. "Last night, while hiding at my father's lake house, I watched the videos of my behavior. I saw myself through others' eyes, perhaps for the first time. What I saw was disgusting." Tyler looked directly into the cameras. "Mr. Washington, I offer you my deepest apology, though I know words are inadequate. I will plead guilty to all charges and accept whatever punishment the court deems appropriate." The room erupted as reporters shouted questions. Natalie Chen raised her hand for quiet. "My client will take a few questions, but first he has one more statement to make." Tyler returned to the microphone. "To the other victims of my behavior who were silenced through settlements, intimidation, or my father's influence, I apologize to you as well. My attorney has prepared a detailed account of these incidents, which we are providing to the proper authorities. I am prepared to face the legal consequences for all of them." A reporter called out, "Tyler, are you doing this to help your father save face during the confirmation hearings?" Tyler shook his head firmly. "No, my father doesn't know I'm here. In fact, he explicitly instructed me to remain hidden and silent. This decision is mine alone." "Are you aware that your father has been removed as judiciary chair for the confirmation hearings?" Another reporter asked. "I learned that this morning. It's appropriate. My father's involvement would compromise the integrity of the process." "Do you expect to serve jail time?" Tyler nodded soberly. "Yes, and I accept that as just. For too long I've operated as if consequences were for other people. That ends today." At the White House, Jackson Washington watched the press conference between interviews. President Chambers joined him, equally surprised by this turn of events. "Did you see this coming?" the president asked. "Not at all," Jackson admitted. "This is unexpected. It certainly changes the dynamic of your confirmation hearings." Jackson nodded thoughtfully. "It removes one complication while potentially creating others. Some senators may feel pressure to oppose my nomination to prove they're not influenced by this situation." "True," the president acknowledged. "But Bradford's removal as chair helps considerably. Reynolds is tough but fair. He'll evaluate you on your merits." Jackson's phone buzzed with a text from Captain Rogers. "Tyler Bradford just came to the station voluntarily. Wants to provide evidence about other incidents. Thought you should know." The revelation of Tyler's other victims had shifted the story significantly. News outlets that had initially framed the incident as an isolated controversy were now investigating a pattern of privilege and corruption that spanned years. Senator Bradford's role in covering up his son's previous offenses became the focus of intense scrutiny. By late afternoon, Bradford was summoned to the Majority Leader's office. Phillips didn't invite him to sit. "This is beyond damage control, William," Phillips said grimly. "The Ethics Committee is opening an investigation into your use of office resources and influence to obstruct justice in your son's prior cases." Bradford paled. "That's absurd. I never used official resources." "Stop lying," Phillips interrupted sharply. "Tyler has provided emails, phone records, and witness statements that prove otherwise. You use Senate staff, government resources, and the power of your office to intimidate victims and pressure law enforcement." Bradford slumped against the wall. "Charles, we've been friends for 20 years. Which is why I'm giving you this courtesy meeting instead of having you served with the Ethics Committee notice in front of the press," Phillips replied coldly. "You have two options: resign your seat voluntarily or face expulsion proceedings." "Over my son's traffic incident?" Bradford asked incredulously. "No, William, over your years of corruption and obstruction of justice. Tyler's public confession is just the beginning. 3 of his previous victims have already come forward with documentation of how you personally intervened to silence them." As Bradford left the Majority Leader's office, reporters swarmed him with questions about Tyler's confession and the emerging evidence of his own misconduct. For once, the senator had no prepared statement, no strategic response. The carefully constructed political machine he'd built over decades was collapsing around him. Meanwhile, Jackson Washington concluded his final interview of the day with measured optimism. The reporter's last question was perhaps the most poignant. "Mr. Washington, given everything that's happened, do you have any personal message for Tyler Bradford?" Jackson considered carefully before answering. Yes, accountability is difficult but necessary. Mr. Bradford's decision to take responsibility for his actions shows courage that was missing yesterday. The path to redemption begins with accepting consequences, and I hope he finds his way forward from this point. As Washington left the White House that evening, the contrast could not have been more stark. The senator who had once seemed untouchable was fighting for political survival, while the man his son had assaulted was on his way to the highest court in the land. Justice, it seemed, had its own timeline after all. 3 months later, Jackson Washington sat in the robing room of the Supreme Court, fingers tracing the embroidered name on his new judicial robe. The confirmation process had been intense but surprisingly focused on his qualifications rather than the scandal that had preceded his nomination. With a bipartisan vote of 68 to 32, he had become the newest Associate Justice of the Supreme Court. Justice Washington, a clerk appeared at the door. Your family has arrived. Jackson nodded, taking a final moment of reflection before meeting Aisha and Jamal in the private reception area. His wife embraced him tightly, tears glistening in her eyes. I'm so proud of you, she whispered. Jamal, now 16 and nearly as tall as his father, stood a bit straighter in his perfectly pressed suit. Congratulations, Dad. Thank you both for standing with me through everything, Jackson said, his usual composure briefly giving way to emotion. This achievement belongs to all of us. The journey from that morning at the traffic light to the Supreme Court had been extraordinary. The media had initially fixated on the scandal, but as the confirmation hearings progressed, the focus shifted to Jackson's impressive legal career, judicial philosophy, and temperament. His testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee, now chaired by Senator Reynolds, had been hailed as one of the most thoughtful and nuanced in recent memory. A discreet knock at the door interrupted their family moment. Chief Justice Marshall entered, extending his hand to Jackson. Ready for your first day, Justice Washington? Yes, Chief Justice, Jackson replied with quiet confidence. Your investiture ceremony was quite something, Marshall commented. I don't recall ever seeing such diverse attendance, constitutional scholars alongside community activists, corporate attorneys next to civil rights veterans. Jackson smiled. The law touches everyone. I've tried to remember that throughout my career. As they prepared to enter the courtroom for Jackson's first session, a court aide approached with a note. This was delivered for you this morning, Justice Washington. Jackson unfolded the simple white card. Inside was a brief message in careful handwriting. Justice Washington, congratulations on your confirmation. Your dignity and integrity throughout this process have taught me more about justice than my father's entire career. I begin my community service sentence today. Respectfully, Tyler Bradford. Jackson tucked the note into his robe pocket, his expression revealing nothing as he prepared to join his colleagues on the bench. The Bradford family's fall from grace had been swift and comprehensive. Senator William Bradford had resigned rather than face expulsion, the Ethics Committee investigation having uncovered numerous instances of influence peddling and obstruction of justice. He now faced potential criminal charges of his own. Tyler had pled guilty to assault with hate crime enhancements, but received a reduced sentence in recognition of his cooperation and testimony about his father's corrupt practices. The judge had sentenced him to 18 months, with all but 3 months suspended, followed by 5 years of probation, mandatory counseling, and 2,000 hours of community service working with inner-city youth programs. The most surprising development had been Tyler's complete transformation. After his public confession, he had sought treatment for alcohol addiction and begun making amends to his previous victims. Several had come forward to acknowledge his personal apologies and efforts at restitution. While nothing could erase his actions, his commitment to change appeared genuine. As Jackson entered the Supreme Court chamber for the first time as Justice Washington, he reflected on the extraordinary sequence of events that had brought him here. That morning at the traffic light could have been just another indignity suffered in silence, another injustice without consequence. Instead, it had become a catalyst for change, not just in his life but in Tyler's and perhaps in small ways in the nation's understanding of privilege and accountability. The court's marshal called out the traditional oyez, 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 announcing the entrance of the justices and the beginning of the session. Justice Jackson Washington took his seat at the far end of the bench, the junior member of the court, but every bit the equal of his colleagues in authority and responsibility. The first case involved questions of equal protection under the 14th Amendment, fitting for Washington's debut. As the attorneys presented their arguments, his questions were precise and thoughtful, revealing both his deep constitutional knowledge and his practical understanding of how legal decisions affect real lives. During a break in the proceedings, Justice Hernandez, who had been on the court for 12 years, leaned over to whisper to Washington. Your question about the practical implications for rural communities was excellent. That's often overlooked in these theoretical discussions. Thank you, Washington replied. I've found that justice works best when it remembers the people it serves. After the court adjourned for the day, Washington returned to his chambers to find a small gathering waiting: his former law partners, several community leaders from his pro bono work, and his old mentor, Judge Thompson, now in his 80s. We wanted to witness this day, Thompson explained, embracing Washington. From my rookie law clerk to Supreme Court Justice, you've made an old man very proud. I had excellent teachers, Washington replied, looking around at the assembled faces who had shaped his legal journey. Later that evening, as Jackson and Aisha prepared for the small dinner they'd planned to mark the occasion, a news alert appeared on his phone. Tyler Bradford had given his first interview since beginning his community service. In it, he spoke candidly about his privileged upbringing, his father's corrupt influence, and his own journey toward accepting responsibility. The interviewer had asked if he ever expected forgiveness from those he'd harmed, including Justice Washington. Forgiveness isn't something you're entitled to, Tyler had responded. Justice Washington showed me something more important than forgiveness. He showed me what dignity looks like, what integrity means in action. I don't deserve his forgiveness, but I'm grateful for the example he set. When I assaulted him, I thought I was demonstrating power. Now I understand that real power is what he showed in response: the strength to remain true to your principles even when facing injustice. Jackson showed the interview to Aisha, who watched it thoughtfully. He seems genuinely changed, she observed. Time will tell, Jackson replied, but change has to start somewhere. As they left for dinner, Jackson's phone rang with a call from the White House. President Chambers wanted to personally congratulate Justice Washington on his first day on the bench. History will remember your confirmation for many reasons, the president said, but I hope most of all it will be remembered as a moment when our system worked as it should, when merit prevailed over privilege, when accountability transcended power, and when justice was truly blind. Jackson thanked the president and ended the call, reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. From a routine morning commute to the highest court in the land, with an extraordinary reckoning of privilege and power along the way. The story was far from over. His tenure on the court was just beginning, and Tyler Bradford's redemption remained a work in progress. But today, at least, justice had been served. As Justice Jackson Washington stepped out into the Washington evening with his family, he carried with him not just the weight of his new responsibilities, but also the knowledge that sometimes, perhaps not often enough, but sometimes, the arc of the moral universe did indeed bend toward justice.